So an interesting story came out that I missed. It came out last month. Um, Donald Trump is pushing for more debates. Now, initially there were supposed to be three. Apparently, that's the standard number of debates that typically take place for a presidential election. And Donald Trump is pushing. Basically, his campaign says we want four. We want more debates. We want to get out there that much more, that much earlier, bigger, bolder, etc. Now, this, believe it or not, tells something. It's one thing what a group or a particular campaign says. Campaigns has this talk a certain way in order to ensure that there's enthusiasm within the context of their supporters. They don't want their supporters demoralized. Demoralized supporters don't come out to the polls. They need their people upbeat, energetic, believing that they can win so they can go to the polls and hopefully get their guy over the finish line, whether they know internally that being true or not. The same thing definitely applies to Donald Trump, who lies as easily as he breathes. And in Donald Trump's case, and many of his supporters, I have a few on the channel who watch my channel, I have been fair to Donald Trump. Fair according to my own ideological goal set. I haven't moved goalposts on you. If he did something that I didn't like, I would say so. If he did something that I liked, I would say so. When I make the point that Donald Trump is going to lose this election, I don't do it out of a place of chest thumping. I even do it with a certain sense of pain in saying so. You must understand, in order for me to get what I want, meaning certain political concessions and changes in the way we go about our affairs that would better deal with the rough edges of our world and our system for various communities in this country, I realize that that's impossible to do without having Joe Biden believe he's going to lose. Even the perception of it makes it that much more difficult to do. Because if you've noticed, Joe Biden doesn't give a shit about anything now. He's in his basement, and he knows that the majority of the people who are going to vote for him by the tune of 60, almost 70%, are doing so just because he is not named Donald Trump. Meaning Joe Biden could be a ham sandwich, and Joe Biden will still get the same vote total that he is getting right now. That ham sandwich may actually get a little bit more, all things considering. I would say this. Right now, Donald Trump tips his hand. And he's showing that his acknowledgement or his understanding of reality to some degree is just similar to my own. My point of view is that back in 2016, and many of his supporters point to 2016 and say, well, hey, the polling was saying Trump was going to lose back then too. And hey, Huffington Post had Trump supposing Hillary Clinton winning by like 98% or something the day that she actually lost. So if that was doing that back then, it's very possible that it's doing back now. Yes, it's possible. Is it likely? I would say no, because the situation is different. Back then, nobody knew what Donald Trump was. Donald Trump was a blank slate of sorts. Yes, people thought he was incompetent, but people were looking for change, and the last thing they wanted to do was put Hillary Clinton back in that office. It wasn't the goddamn Russians. She just lost. On top of losing that, the Russian stuff came in order to try to cover up the fact that she lost, with Democrats being bewildered that the most experienced woman in any multi-reality frame lost to reality show hosts. But the fact is, she did lose. This is the Electoral College, right? She knew the rules before she got into the race. And under that rule set, she lost. But she wasn't a blank slate. Donald Trump was. Donald Trump wasn't in office, so he had nothing associated with him from a standpoint of the decisions that he would make in a political space. He was a blank slate. This time around, he is not a blank slate. He is a defined quantity. And being a defined quantity, he's been availed by multiple, let's say, crises or disasters. And Donald Trump, in front of the nation, had the capacity to show that he was competent in dealing with those crises. And he showed the opposite. He showed that he was dramatically incompetent and had no capacity at all to deal with the crises and disasters that befell this country. The reason why I'm saying this is because he's running against Joe Biden. Joe Biden basically doesn't have to do anything. Joe Biden can sit on a park bench from now to the rest of the presidency and win the presidency. and would do so more handedly if he could just sit there the entire time. That's how bad Donald Trump is doing. On the issue of race relations, he's in the toilet. On the issue of the economy, believe it or not, the public gives him somewhat of a pass on the issue of the economy. But on his handling of COVID-19, he gets a dramatic F on that one also. So on the major crisis, he's flunking miserably. His foreign policy is crap. You've had a situation where most of the tax breaks went to the top 1% and the public knows it. So what are you using to run on in a context like this? And the fact that you have these two major crises just before the election, with the media focusing on both because you have people protesting and out on the streets, even now in DC overnight, you have people out there doing yoga. So what do you have to run on? And how do you convince the public that hates you greatly, is embarrassed by you, and who recognizes that you have killed a lot of them off based on your incompetence? Your focus on the economy was the wrong bet. The public wanted to remain safe and whole, with economic concerns second. They did want the government to ensure that everybody was remained intact, but all things being equal, they wanted to make sure that they were safe and sound. That was something the president didn't care about. So now Joe Biden just says random stuff that doesn't really mean anything. He stays in his basement. He comes out every so often, makes a statement, and that in and of itself is enough to just coast. Donald Trump knows this. He knows this. 3 a.m. between him and his God, he says, yes, I have problems in this race. You can look at Real Clear Politics. Every poll comes back basically Joe Biden. It was like 90-something% of the polls, even in swing states. So Trump must change this momentum somehow. He has to have something that takes place that tilts the political momentum back in his direction, where the public looks at him and says, okay, fair enough. We'll give you another chance. Yes, you got 200,000 people killed by the time the election takes place, but we'll give you another chance. Now, I don't know what that moment would be, but I do know if that moment would take place, it would most likely take place in the debates, unless Trump is going to come up with some kind of new policy issue. And if he does come up with a new policy, it could be introduced in the debates. But the debates is the lightning point that the majority of the public watches. You're getting a huge share of the American public, a huge amount of people who are going to go and vote either for you or for Joe Biden, watching that night on those X number of nights, and you get to make your point against the candidate. Now, if you believe Joe Biden is too weak to do the job, that's going to be the chance that you're going to get to show that. Trump knows that he needs as many of these opportunities as possible. If you, say for the example, don't get what you want out of the first two, maybe you get it out of the third, or maybe you get it out of the fourth. But it takes that extra fourth, that extra debate, to give his or widen his chances in regards to doing something to change the direction of this race. Trump is tilting his hand on this. This is him acknowledging just basic reality. I am in a difficult strait in trying to win this race, and I am looking for anything I can get my hands on to do so. And in this case, if I get the opportunity, more people will be watching probably a debate than anything else, especially if I can just stand mano a mano with Joe Biden. Rational. But it does mean that he knows that he is trying to make up the gap. The New York Times basically makes the point that early on, Donald Trump was saying maybe there shouldn't be any debates. Because at that point, he was looking at the Democratic primary. He was like, God, that's a clusterfuck. Yeah, maybe I don't need to have a debate. Because at that point in his head, I'm going to be doing fucking awesome. He didn't necessarily see people out in the streets, and for that matter, COVID-19 that was just around the corner a few months later. Like, share, and subscribe. By the way, it's a goddamn shame, right? Like I said, if lefties are going to get what they want, especially after Sanders flamed out, it requires this ability or this notion that he could lose. And the fact that Trump has just been this monstrously ridiculous, it makes it that much worse for lefties who actually want to try to get some kind of policy concessions. Like, share, subscribe.